skiing race through the forest with a gun behind your back, 5 targets to hit, competitors breathing down your neck. No, this is not the scene from the latest James Bond movie. This is an actual sport, an Olympic sport that I'm in love with, and I'm here to tell you about the rules, some of the interesting strategy tips, and why in general I enjoy watching biathlon every time it comes on, whether it's a World Championship, World Cup, or the Olympic Games. Welcome back to the TohirT channel. My name is Tahir, and yes, today we're going to talk about this obscure and very weird sport that, again, I'm purely in love with. Let's do this! Maybe it is a couple of winter storms in a row, maybe it's the fact that I missed the sport and we keep seeing the Winter Olympic Games being delayed, but in general, I do want to make a few new fans of biathlon out of you guys. To avoid bagging you down with the strategy of the sport, let's start with the basics. Let's focus on the racing, on the shooting, and the combination of both that creates different sport events, and from then on out, I'll drop here and there some different interesting tidbits of information when it comes to the actual strategy. The racing. In a nutshell, biathlon is a cross-country skiing competition. You race through a combination of different terrains. Most of the races last anywhere between 4 kilometers, which is roughly 2 miles, and up to 20 kilometers, which is roughly 12 miles. And they take place around the same lap. You lap through that racetrack a couple of times, and there's a combination of the hills where the athletes have to push themselves up the hill, down slopes where they essentially can catch a breath and maintain their speed and avoid any falls, as well as the flat areas where you would usually find the actual stadium, the fans, the start-finish line, as well as the shooting range. There are 2 strategy layers to pay attention to that are very quickly noticeable as you watch the races. Number 1, of course, paying attention to your breath. If you think about it, when you're at that shooting range, when you're about to squeeze the trigger, you have to hold your breath. So a lot of athletes actually watch their breath as they race. And number 2 are those pesky downslopes. The falls, aside from losing the time and a potential injury, pose a lot of risk to your rifle, because the rifle might jam and stop working at the shooting range. I've seen that happen plenty of times after the fall on the racetrack, as well as you might just completely misalign the aim, which makes your shooting that much harder. Shooting. Now we're talking about the weirdest part of the sport for those who watch it for the first time, because they see the rifle and they're like, wait a second. Someone has to shoot while they're skiing? Well, not necessarily. There are actually specific dedicated shooting areas or shooting zones. You will observe 2 shooting positions that the athletes take depending on the portion of the race. They cannot pick and choose. They're always predetermined for a particular portion of the race. So some races start with a standing, go into prone. Some races start with a prone, go into standing. When it comes to the distance, it's always the same. It's 50 meters or roughly 50 yards. 100 or so feet. It's essentially the Olympic-sized swimming pool between you and the target, or half of the football field. And there are always 5 targets, but the targets do vary in size. On the prone position, you get a smaller target, so of 45 millimeters, or roughly 2 inches. And when you go to the standing position, you have another set of 5 targets at the same distance, but now they're larger. They're 115 millimeters, or roughly 4.5 inches. Now, to make it interesting, here are the targets from the biathlon compared to some of the common household objects. Now, imagine the situation that you just went up and down the hills, you almost coughed up your lungs during the racetrack, and now you have to stop, catch your breath, and hit those targets with only 5 bullets, and there are 5 of them, so you cannot afford a single miss. It's very deceiving when you see them going into the position, and the broadcast usually just shows you the close-up of the target, but you don't realize how far those targets are actually from the shooter, and especially when they go into prone and they have to face that small target, how tiny it is at the distance of those 50 meters or yards away from you. During the broadcast itself, there are plenty of visual clues in terms of how your athlete is doing at the shooting range. First and foremost, the easiest one to tell is, do you have the fully cleared board? All targets start as black dots, so they're essentially black on white, very easy to spot in the snowy conditions, and they will flip into white as the shooter hits the target. Now, you will notice sometimes those target sets flashing red during the broadcast. The flash red means that the shooter actually missed, so the athlete missed the target. And in that case, some shooters just keep shooting at the same target until they hit it, or in most cases, because of how fast they move, they already moved on to the next one, and they most likely will take a shot before you see that red flash on the screen of your TV. I'll say primarily focus on watching a particular athlete and seeing how they do at different shooting ranges. There are a couple of strategies at play. I actually combine 2 strategies in one because they're just the different sides of the same coin. In one cases, you have great skiers. They're blazing fast on the racetrack, but they suck when it comes to shooting. And on the contrary, you have some of the other athletes who are sharpshooters, but they're not as fast as some of the other guys. And you rarely find an athlete like Ole Einar Bjørndalen, who is essentially like multiple times Olympic champion in biathlon, who is great at both. But it's a rarity, and you usually see the balance of two skills across the entire field, and that is why those races are continued to be exciting from the very start to the very finish line. Penalties. Penalties vary depending on the type of race you're watching. I will touch on the type of races in the next final segment, but just think about the fact that there are only 3 types of penalties the athlete can accrue while they're going through the race. When they miss the target, the first and most popular type of the penalty is an extra lap. So essentially there is a 150 meter or so lap right next to the shooting range that the athlete has to take every time they miss a shot. So if they miss 3 shots, they have to do 3 laps on that small track before they can continue the race. Obviously that adds to their time and that adds to their fatigue. The next type of penalty for missing the shot are the extra bullets. So essentially you get 5 shots in a cartridge for 5 targets that you have, but in certain races, and it's very clearly indicated during the broadcast, the athletes get another 3 shots. The challenge there is the fact that they're manually loaded, so they're not part of the cartridge. You have to load them one by one. So if you miss a target, you have to go reload the gun, pull it back up, take a shot, and if you missed it again, you have to reload it again, spend more time, take a shot. But at least it's not taking extra laps, so it's only waste your time, not necessarily waste your energy. The final type of penalty for missing a shot is the penalty time. So on certain types of races that are primarily timed, so essentially the athletes are not competing against each other live on the track, but rather they aim to finish the race the quickest. So on those, you usually see extra minute added for every shot missed. Because of how different these 3 types of penalties are, the strategy varies depending on the type of race the athlete participates, but in most cases, my favorite part is really watching them, realizing that this can be their gold medal shot, that they need to hit it, and they take the extra second. You see the diaphragm going in as they take a breath in and they pull the trigger. It's empowering, it's a lot of fun. It's especially fun to watch those really good shooters when they just machine shot, go one thing after another. They hit all 5 targets like in the matter of 5 seconds and just dart off from the shooting range back on the racetrack. To conclude the video, I want to, at the very high level, touch on the format of the races that you will witness. One more time, the broadcasts are great and clear, and you will understand the race, and they will explain the rules a couple of times through the event. But if you want to kind of glance from a couple of visual cues what kind of race you're watching, there are really 2 differentiating types, whether they start en masse the race or they start the race in intervals. Mass start races kind of give away their purpose in the name. Essentially all the athletes on the racetrack start at the same time and they go at it through the first lap, neck and neck, shoulder to shoulder. That's where the craziness starts, because they have to shoot next to each other. And that cacophony of the shooting range really at this point is like a dear sound to my heart.
That is what you get for pushing the pace, and there are some really good skiers in that first group. So
on the flip side of that, there are interval starts. Interval starts do have 2 different subtypes. In one type of race, it's primarily sprints and individual races. The athletes just start in 30-second intervals. There is some sort of seeding process that decides who goes first, who goes last, but ultimately it's all about how quick do they get to the finish line. So the position at which you finish does not matter as much as how quick you were through the track, as well as how many or how few penalties you accrued while you were shooting at the shooting range. And the second subtype of the interval race, the pursuit race, in those races the starting position of the athlete is predetermined by the prior race. Usually you see the pursuit races take place a day or 2 after the sprint race. So they let the sprint race finish. Depending on where you land in the sprint race also determines your position at that start of the pursuit race. And pursuit races are fun because you see those like hungry athletes who might have missed by a few seconds on the sprint race trying to chase that leader who stole their gold medal during the sprint race. And of course you get the relays. Relays are always fun to watch. You get your regular relays, meaning that just male or female teams, as well as the mixed relays, which are also a lot of fun and usually gives you the top athletes from, say, the same country at the Olympic Games competing together as a team. The great thing, you do not have any batons to drop. There is a dedicated zone where the athletes pass the stage to each other and all they really have to do is touch each other. So you see a lot of high fives and taps on the shoulder. But that's about it. This is as complex as it gets when it comes to formats of the races. And as I said, there are more strategies, more small nuances to different types of formats of the events, but you will catch on them pretty fast after you watch a couple of the events. Did you enjoy learning about biathlon? Are you ready to watch your first full race, maybe at the next Olympic Games? And do you have any other questions about the sport? Well, stick them in the comment section below. Clearly, I love this sport. I mean, it's funny, I have to go and find the family footage. If I won't find it, I'll just describe it to you right now. But essentially, as a kid, I would literally act the entire race alongside my favorite athlete. Like, I would literally be there at the starting line when she's about to start the race, and I would mimic her movements through the race. Then as she goes into the shooting range, I would drop into the prone position as she would drop into the prone position, pretend like I'm shooting, get up and continue the race, or do my penalty lap. I was always equally excited to watch the biathlon when I was a kid. I'm still excited to watch it, and this is the primary reason I watch the Olympic Games. Biathlon is the sport that I watch at the Winter Olympic Games. And yeah, it's a ton of fun to see your favorite athletes like Ole Einar Bjørndalen, someone who I grew to love watching at the very beginning of his career, and seeing him during the last Winter Olympic Games yet again winning his like 7th, 8th, 12th, whatever there was, Olympic gold medal was a lot of fun. I actually have some of these screenshots from my phone from back then when it was like 5 a.m. in the morning, I'm in the bed on my phone watching the biathlon. So come to this dark side, let me know what you thought about the sport, if this is the first time you learned anything about it. And well, if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and I will see you next Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, on this very channel. In the meantime, here's some of the end cards. Enjoy watching the rest of the videos on my channel. Peace!